In the pursuit of truth, clarity is essential. We have stripped away the narrative to show you unfiltered, unedited reality. Witness raw, compelling footage from the front lines of justice, allowing the actual events to speak entirely for themselves.
Step out of the vehicle. It's coming back stolen.
Officer, that's my car. The registration matches my license. Please verify the VIN.
Turn around, hands behind your back.
There is no probable cause. I am a public defender.
You can explain it to the judge.
I'm not this is being recorded.
The hospital door slid open quietly as the night shift ended. Pale light spilled onto the pavement. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp concrete. Inside, monitors continued their steady rhythm, but outside the world slowed. Nia Thompson stepped into the parking lot, shoulders heavy from 12 hours in the NICU. Her scrubs were creased at the elbows. Her badge swung lightly against her chest. She had spent the night adjusting ventilators, counting breaths, watching chests rise no more than a hand's width, guarding lives that weighed less than a bag of sugar. She reached her car and unlocked it. "Ma'am, stop right there." Nia turned. Two unmarked SUVs idled at the edge of the lot. Men in jackets with block lettering stepped forward, boots echoing softly. "Immigration and Customs Enforcement," one of them said. "We need to ask you a few questions." Nia blinked, exhaustion giving way to confusion. "About what?" "Proof of your status," the agent replied. "Identification." She lifted her badge instinctively. "I'm a nurse here. I just finished my shift. I'm a U.S. citizen." The agent did not look at the badge. He glanced at his partner instead. "Do you have documentation to prove that?" The words landed wrong. Documentation. Prove that. Nia felt her heart rate change. Not spike. Tighten. She kept her voice even. "I was born here. I don't carry my passport to work. You don't need anything else." Another agent stepped closer, positioning himself between her and the car door. "We just need to verify. It won't take long." A security guard near the entrance slowed his walk. A respiratory therapist exiting behind Nia stopped, phone halfway out of her pocket. The glow from the NICU windows reflected off the ICE vehicles, casting hard lines across the lot. Nia shook her head slightly. "I'm not required to prove my citizenship to leave my job. I have patients inside who almost didn't make it through the night." The first agent's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, you're being detained pending verification." Detained. Hands closed gently but firmly around her arms. Not rough, not kind, just final. The door of the SUV opened. The sound was hollow and heavy. Nia looked back at the hospital entrance as she was guided forward. The place where she had just held a premature infant's hand through a seizure. Where alarms still sounded. Where she was trusted with life. The door shut behind her. In the quiet of that parking lot, as dawn edged closer, a U.S. citizen who had just saved babies was taken away as a suspect. And the cameras had already started recording. The story pulls back from the parking lot and moves backward long before the SUVs arrived. And the word detained replaced exhausted. Nia Thompson grew up in a household where care was practical, not poetic. Her mother worked double shifts. Her aunt was a home health aide. When people got sick, you showed up. When babies struggled, you stayed longer. Nursing was not a calling she discovered. It was work she respected. NICU. Training sharpened that respect into discipline. Tiny bodies. Fragile lungs. Alarms that could not be ignored. Nia learned to move slowly and think fast, to read numbers without panic, to keep her voice low when parents were breaking apart inches away. She became the nurse doctors trusted at 3 a.m. when options narrowed. She was born in the United States, raised here, educated here, licensed here. Her file at the hospital was thick with certifications and commendations. Her badge opened doors that stayed locked to others. She never imagined it would be dismissed in a parking lot. The ICE agents who stopped her carried a different set of incentives. Their unit had been assigned increased enforcement near transit hubs and large institutions. Hospitals counted. Early morning hours counted more. Supervisors emphasized results. Stops logged. Verifications completed. Encounters documented. The work rewarded speed, not nuance. They were told to trust indicators. Late hours, certain neighborhoods, certain appearances. Verification could come later. That night, a vehicle description circulated through their system. A general alert. No name, no warrant, no confirmed target, just enough ambiguity to justify a stop if someone fit the picture. When Nia walked out in scrubs, tired and alone, the agents made a decision without confirming anything beyond what they thought they saw. They did not call hospital administration. They did not request a supervisor before placing hands on her arms. They chose detention first, An explanation later. Nia did not know any of this as she sat in the back of the SUV. She only knew she had followed every rule she knew. Badge visible, voice calm, hands still. She had done what authority always asked of her inside the hospital. Outside, that obedience was reinterpreted as compliance with something that had no legal footing. Two systems collided in that lot. One built on verification and care, the other on suspicion and quotas. When they met, the burden shifted instantly to the person least prepared to fight it in the moment. Because in that encounter, citizenship was not treated as a fact. It was treated as a claim that needed permission to exist. The escalation unfolded quietly, driven by refusal to pause. Nia Thompson sat in the back of the SUV, hands resting on her lap badge still clipped to her scrubs. The engine idled. The interior smelled of plastic and stale air. An agent stood outside with the door open, speaking into a radio in short bursts, framing the encounter before anyone could interrupt it. "I'm a NICU nurse," Nia said calmly. "You can call the hospital. My supervisor is inside right now." The agent did not look back. He closed the door instead. The latch sounded final. Outside, more staff had stopped. A resident leaned against a column phone held steady. A security guard approached cautiously, palms visible. "Officers, she works here. She just came off shift." The agents did not engage him. One repositioned slightly, blocking the view of the open door. Nia felt the SUV move, slowly, just enough to separate her from the hospital entrance. She leaned forward, voice raised but controlled. "You have no warrant. I am a U.S. citizen. You are not allowed to detain me without cause." The agent in the passenger seat turned halfway. "We're verifying your status. If you're legal, you'll be released." "Legal?" The word pressed down harder than the cuffs had earlier. Nia swallowed and stared through the tinted window at the NICU floor above, lights still bright, alarms still sounding. She thought of the infant she had just stabilized, the mother who had squeezed her hand and whispered thank you. The contrast felt unreal. Outside, the small crowd grew. Phones were no longer subtle. A respiratory therapist spoke louder now. "She's American. She was born here." Another voice followed. "This is wrong." An agent stepped away to make a call, pacing near the hood. He spoke in low tones, then shook his head and spoke again, sharper. The delay stretched. Verification that should have taken seconds became something else when no one wanted to be the first to reverse course. Inside the SUV, Nia closed her eyes briefly and focused on breathing the way she taught parents to do when panic crept in. Slow in, slow out. Do not escalate. Do not give them anything they could twist. The vehicle stopped again. Doors opened. Voices overlapped. A supervisor arrived, posture stiff, eyes scanning the scene. "Why is she detained?" he asked. The answer came fast and thin. "Pending verification." Verification of what the supervisor asked. No one answered immediately. The crowd felt it. The hesitation. The absence of a reason that could be spoken out loud. Cameras moved closer. A nurse said her name clearly. "Nia Thompson, she works here." The supervisor looked at the badge through the window. Then at the hospital entrance. Then back at the agents. His jaw tightened. That moment, suspended between engines and alarms and watching eyes, was when escalation stopped being procedural and started being indefensible. Because once doubt replaces authority, the record begins writing itself. The injustice became real when hesitation turned into restraint. The supervisor opened the SUV door and spoke to Nia through the frame. "Ma'am, please step out." She complied slowly, feet touching the pavement, shoulders squared. Her badge swung forward again, catching the light as if insisting on being seen. The supervisor turned to the agents. "On what basis is she being held?" One agent answered without meeting his eyes. "Possible immigration violation. Pending verification." The supervisor paused. He looked at Nia. "Are you a U.S. citizen?" "Yes," Nia said. "Born here. Licensed nurse. I just worked 12 hours upstairs." The supervisor nodded once. Then he looked back at the agents. "Do you have any evidence to the contrary?" Silence stretched. An agent shifted his weight. Another glanced toward the phone still recording from the curb. No warrant was produced. No database hit spoken aloud. Nothing that could justify what was already happening. Instead of releasing her, one agent stepped forward. "For our safety, we're going to transport her until this is resolved." Nia's stomach dropped. That sentence did not belong there. For safety. Transport. Words that erased the gap between doubt and detention. "Wait," the supervisor said. But the agent had already reached for Nia's arm again, guiding her toward the rear door. "Not rough. Firm. Final. The crowd reacted this time. A nurse said no. A security guard stepped closer. Phones rose higher. Nia did not pull away. She kept her hands visible. She turned her head just enough to speak clearly. "You are detaining a U.S. citizen without cause. This is unlawful." The agent did not answer. The door opened. The inside of the SUV looked darker now, smaller. The hospital lights reflected faintly on the tinted glass, a reminder of where she had just been trusted with fragile lives. As she was seated inside, the door closed with a heavy sound that cut through the parking lot. The latch clicked, the engine revved. From inside, Nia watched the hospital entrance recede a few feet as the vehicle repositioned. She saw colleagues standing, frozen hands at their sides, faces tight with disbelief. She saw the supervisor still standing there, jaw set, phone already in his hand. The injustice was complete. A nurse taken from her workplace. A citizen treated as removable. No charge spoken. No evidence offered. Just suspicion sealed behind a closing door. And as the SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying her past the building where newborns fought for breath, the line between mistake and violation disappeared. What remained was a record that could not be undone quietly, and a cost that would not stay theoretical for long. The revelation came through records that could not be bent by suspicion. The SUV stopped at a nearby federal field office, fluorescent lights humming overhead, as Nia Thompson was escorted inside. No holding cell, no charge sheet. Just a chair in a small interview room, and a door left half-closed as if uncertainty itself needed space to breathe. An agent sat across from her, tablet in hand. Name, date of birth, place of birth. Nia answered each question once clearly without embellishment. He typed, paused, then typed again. Minutes passed, then more. Another agent entered, speaking quietly. A supervisor followed, eyes already narrowed at the screen. He read in silence, scrolling, cross-checking. Birth certificate on file. Social security record. State nursing license. Passport record. Everything aligned. He looked up. She's a U.S. citizen. The room went still. The supervisor exhaled through his nose, then turned to the agents. Why was she transported? The first agent answered carefully. She could not immediately prove her status. The supervisor's voice dropped. That is not grounds for detention, especially not on hospital property. He turned to Nia. Ms. Thompson, you are free to go. I apologize for the detention. Nia nodded once. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She asked for what mattered. I want copies of all reports, all body camera footage, and the names of every agent involved. You will receive them, the supervisor said. Outside, dawn had begun to soften the sky. Hospital staff who had followed the vehicles now stood near the entrance, phone still out. When Nia stepped through the doors, Scrub's rumpled badge still clipped, the crowd shifted instinctively to give her space. Someone said her name. Someone else whispered. They took her. Nia stopped briefly and faced the group. I am a U.S. citizen, she said calmly. And this should not have happened. Inside the field office, voices rose behind closed doors. Protocols questioned. Decisions replayed. A supervisor made calls upward, not downward. What had been framed as verification collapsed under the weight of a single fact that should have ended everything at the parking lot. Citizenship confirmed. The agents who acted on assumption were left with something else to explain. A detention without cause. A workplace removed from context. A record now complete. And once written, that record would not disappear. It would multiply. The crusade for justice began before Nia Thompson made it home that morning. By the time she left the federal office, the footage from the hospital parking lot was already circulating. Multiple angles. Clear audio. The agents' jackets. The word detained. The moment the SUV door closed while NICU windows glowed in the background, what could have been reduced to paperwork became unmistakable on screen. Hospital leadership moved quickly. A formal complaint was filed the same day, supported by security footage, badge access logs, and witness statements from nurses, residents, and guards who had watched the detention unfold. The hospital's legal counsel contacted federal authorities before noon, not to ask questions, to demand answers. Civil rights organizations followed. They requested records, detention logs, justifications, supervisor approvals. The response exposed a void where authority had been assumed instead of documented. No warrant, no confirmed target, no exigent circumstance. Just a stop that escalated because no one wanted to be the first to stop it. The lawsuit was filed in federal court within weeks. It alleged unlawful detention of a U.S. citizen. violation of Fourth and Fifth Amendment protections, racial profiling, interference with lawful employment, emotional distress inflicted in the immediate aftermath of patient care. The evidence list was spare. Video, timestamps, admissions, verification records showing citizenship confirmed only after detention. Discovery moved fast. Internal emails revealed pressure to increase field contacts near large institutions. Training materials warned against detaining without cause. Supervisors acknowledged mistakes in deposition. The defense narrowed its arguments until there were none left to make without contradicting the record. Settlement negotiations did not linger. $14.8 million. The amount reflected more than a single detention. It accounted for deterrence for federal overreach exposed on camera for the message sent when caregivers are treated as removable before being treated as human. The agreement included mandatory retraining, revised enforcement protocols near hospitals, and oversight requirements tied to field detentions. Agents involved were reassigned pending discipline. Supervisory reviews followed. Memos replaced press conferences. Careers shifted quietly documented in files rather than headlines. Nia released one statement through counsel. She said the case was not about punishment. It was about boundaries. She said no one who saves lives should have to prove their right to go home afterward. She returned to work. Same unit, same alarms, same fragile breaths. Colleagues greeted her differently now, with a steadiness that came from knowing something had been confronted, not ignored. Justice did not arrive as spectacle. It arrived as consequence. Structured, recorded, expensive. And for an agency accustomed to acting first and explaining later, the cost finally made that order impossible to defend. The final lesson of this story does not belong to ICE. It belongs to the boundary between suspicion and law, and what happens when that boundary is ignored. Federal immigration authority does not override citizenship. A U.S. citizen does not lose constitutional protection because of their job, their location, or their appearance. There is no legal standard that allows detention based on uncertainty alone. Verification must come before restraint. When detention comes first, the violation is already complete. What failed here was not a lack of information. It was a refusal to pause. The agents had options. Call the hospital. Contact a supervisor before transport. Ask for voluntary verification without restraint. Each option would have ended the encounter legally. Instead, authority chose momentum. This psychological mechanism matters. When enforcement is measured by activity rather than accuracy, doubt becomes a reason to act instead of a reason to stop. Words like verify and safety become shields for decisions that cannot stand on their own. That is how lawful presence turns into unlawful detention. Nia Thompson did not avoid harm because the system protected her in real time. She avoided worse harm because she relied on the same discipline she uses in the NICU. Stay calm. Keep movements deliberate. Speak clearly. Do not escalate. Let the record build. That restraint preserved evidence when the moment could not be corrected. For viewers, the lessons are practical. If you are approached by federal agents, you have the right to ask if you are being detained. You have the right to remain silent beyond identifying yourself if required. You have the right to refuse consent to detention without cause. You do not need to argue. You need to be safe. Documentation lasts longer than confrontation. If you are a witness, your role matters. Recording from a safe distance is lawful in most jurisdictions. Do not interfere physically. Do not provoke. Quiet documentation often carries more weight than raised voices. If you hold authority, the obligation is simple. Verify before you detain. Citizenship is a fact, not a favor. When enforcement acts on appearance instead of evidence, the cost does not disappear. It compounds. The settlement did not erase the memory of a nurse being taken from a hospital parking lot after saving newborns. It did not undo the fear of being treated as removable by strangers with badges. It did something else. It put a price on crossing a constitutional line. $14.8 million moved because verification was delayed until after freedom was taken. Justice here was not loud. It was exact. Protocols changed. Oversight followed. Careers shifted. A boundary was reinforced with consequence. The question that remains is the one that always matters. How many similar detentions end without cameras, without witnesses, without the resources to force a correction? That answer is why this story matters.
Welcome to a channel dedicated to the absolute truth. We believe in holding power to account, by carefully examining the evidence. Opinions vary, but the records don't lie. Thank you so much for watching today.